I was researching military architecture when I noticed something that made absolutely no sense. Star forts, those distinctive geometric fortifications with angular bastions radiating from central structures, supposedly designed for optimal cannon defense in the 1600s and 1700s, except when you examine them closely, when you study their actual construction and usage patterns. The military explanation collapses completely. Because the vast majority of star forts were never involved in military conflicts. They weren't positioned at strategic military choke points, and most disturbingly, a significant percentage of them were operating as hospitals, asylums, and medical facilities by the mid-1800s. Not converted from military use, built as medical facilities from the beginning, despite the elaborate fortification geometry that supposedly served no medical purpose whatsoever. Fort Delaware, built in the 1850s, with classic star fort geometry. Official history calls it a defensive installation. By 1861, it's operating as a hospital and prisoner medical facility. Fort Jefferson in the Dry Tortugas, massive star fort construction, completed in 1875. Never saw military action. Served primarily as a quarantine station and medical facility. The Presidio in San Francisco, star fort design, documented medical usage far exceeding any military defensive function. Pattern after pattern showing these geometric fortifications being used for healing and medical treatment rather than warfare. And when you examine the architectural features closely, when you analyze the acoustic properties and electromagnetic characteristics, you realize they weren't designed for cannon defense at all. They were designed as resonance chambers, as healing frequency generators, as architectural medicine using geometric principles we've been taught to forget. The geometry itself is the first clue. Star forts feature radial symmetry, angular projections at precise mathematical intervals, central structures surrounded by geometric moats or walls creating specific shapes, pentagon, hexagon, octagon configurations appearing repeatedly. These aren't random defensive designs. They're sacred geometric patterns. Patterns that create specific vibrational resonance when constructed at proper scale. Patterns that appear in ancient temples, in healing structures across multiple cultures, in every architectural tradition that understood buildings could affect human health and consciousness through geometric resonance. The star fort design is ancient temple technology, disguised as military fortification. And the disguise was so successful we've spent centuries not asking why hospitals were built like fortresses. I started measuring the geometry systematically. Fort McHenry in Baltimore, classic 5-pointed star configuration. The angles between bastions aren't random. They're 72 degrees. The precise angle that creates pentagonal resonance. The distances from central structure to outer walls follow golden ratio proportions. The placement of internal chambers creates geometric relationships that produce standing wave patterns. This isn't defensive architecture. This is acoustic engineering. Fort Independence in Boston, hexagonal star forts design. The 6-pointed geometry creates specific resonance at frequencies that modern research associates with cellular regeneration and parasympathetic nervous system activation. These structures were designed to produce healing vibrations. And here's what made everything click. The bastion points, those angular projections that supposedly allowed overlapping cannon fire, they're positioned at acoustically significant locations. Sound generated in the central structure reflects off bastion walls at angles that create constructive interference. Multiple reflections converge back toward the center, amplifying specific frequencies while canceling others. The geometry acts as a frequency filter and amplifier, exactly what you'd want in a healing facility, using sound and vibration as therapeutic modalities. The moats surrounding these structures aren't defensive water barriers. They're resonance isolators. Water absorbs vibrations, preventing external interference, with a precisely tuned acoustic environment inside the geometric walls. The construction materials support this interpretation. Star forts were built with massive stone blocks, far exceeding what defensive requirements would demand. The stone choice matters. Many use limestone or granite, materials with specific piezoelectric properties, materials that respond to vibration by generating minute electrical fields. The walls aren't just barriers. They're transducers converting acoustic energy into subtle electromagnetic effects, effects that interact with human bioelectric fields, effects that could facilitate healing through resonance between architectural vibration and cellular frequencies. The thickness of the walls, supposedly for Canaan resistance, creates acoustic mass that sustains vibrations, creates reverberation times measured in seconds, allowing healing frequencies to build and persist. I found acoustic analysis studies conducted on several star forts in the early 1900s before their medical usage was discontinued. The reports document extraordinary reverberation characteristics, specific frequencies sustaining far longer than normal rooms, harmonic resonance patterns emerging when sounds are generated in central chambers. The researchers noted these properties seemed intentionally designed into the architecture but couldn't explain why military fortifications would require such sophisticated acoustic engineering. They filed the studies as architectural curiosities and moved on. Nobody asked why healing facilities housed in fortifications showed acoustic properties identical to ancient healing temples. If you're starting to see the pattern, if the geometric and acoustic evidence is making you question the fortress narrative, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling me if you've ever visited an old star fort and felt something unusual about the space, because what I'm about to show you proves these structures weren't built for warfare. They were built as Tartarian healing centers using frequency medicine that threatened the pharmaceutical industry emerging in the late 1800s. The historical usage patterns contradict the military narrative completely. I examined records for 47 star forts across North America and Europe. Only 12 show documented military combat occurring at their locations. Only 12 out of 47. And in most of those cases, the combat was brief. The fortifications performed poorly as defensive structures, and the sites were quickly The remaining 35, nearly 75%, show primary usage as hospitals, asylums, quarantine facilities, or medical research institutions. That's not coincidence. That's original design purpose showing through the official cover story. Fort Wood in New York Harbor, now the base of the Statue of Liberty. Official history calls it a coastal defense fort built in 1811, but the extensive documentation shows it served primarily as a quarantine and medical facility for incoming immigrants. The geometric star design supposedly for cannon placement, but the bastions were used as isolation wards. The central structure housed medical staff and treatment facilities. The moat served as hygiene barrier. Every architectural feature makes perfect sense as a medical facility and makes questionable sense as a military fort. Fort Adams in Rhode Island, largest star fort in North America, supposedly built to defend Narragansett Bay, never fired a shot in combat, operated extensively as a military hospital with documented healing success rates that exceeded civilian facilities. The reports never explained why the geometric fortification contributed to better medical outcomes, but the data shows it clearly did. The European examples are even more explicit. The Burton Star Fort in Netherlands, built in 1580 according to official dates, extensive records show continuous medical usage including isolation of plague patients in the 1600s, with survival rates significantly higher than surrounding towns. The symmetrical design supposedly for military coordination, but the medical records emphasize how the geometric layout facilitated patient treatment and recovery. The Palmanova Star Fort in Italy, perfect nine-pointed star geometry, designated a UNESCO heritage site. Official history emphasizes military planning, but the historical records show primary usage as a healing retreat for nobility and a medical research center studying the effects of geometric architecture on human health. And the timing of their construction is suspicious. The supposed golden age of Star Fort building, 1550 to 1750, corresponds exactly with the period when Tartarian maps show vast territory in Central Asia with sophisticated architectural and administrative development. The period when European powers were supposedly discovering new fortification designs coincides with the period when they were expanding into territories containing ancient geometric architecture. What if they weren't inventing star forts? What if they were copying designs from structures they encountered in Tartarian territories, structures whose original purpose was medical and healing, but which European military engineers misunderstood or deliberately misrepresented as fortifications? I found construction manuals from the 1600s and 1700s describing star fort geometry. The interesting part isn't what they say, it's what they don't say. They provide precise mathematical instructions for angles, proportions, measurements. They describe the geometry in almost ritualistic detail. But they never actually explain why these specific proportions improve defensive capability. They just assert it as established knowledge, requiring no justification. That's how you write instructions for sacred geometry you don't fully understand. You preserve the measurements exactly because you know they're important, but you create a cover story for why you're using them because the real purpose has been forgotten or suppressed. The medical records from Starfort hospitals in the 1800s are extraordinary when you know what you're looking at. Recovery rates for infectious diseases significantly higher than conventional hospitals. Pain management requiring less medication. Faster wound healing. Better outcomes for psychological conditions. The reports document these results, but attribute them to superior military discipline, better sanitation, unknown factors. They never consider the architecture itself might be the therapeutic agent. Never question why geometric fortifications produce better healing than standard rectangular hospital buildings. The evidence was right in front of medical research for decades, and they couldn't see it because the framework didn't exist to understand architecture as medicine. Then, something changed. Between 1880 and 1920, most Starfort medical facilities were decommissioned. Patients were transferred to new rectangular hospitals. The geometric structures were abandoned, sold off, converted to museums or parks. Official explanations point to modernization, to new medical practices requiring different facilities, to military reorganization. But the timing corresponds perfectly with other patterns we've documented. The rise of pharmaceutical medicine, the establishment of medical licensing that excluded traditional and vibrational healing modalities, the systematic suppression of free energy and frequency-based technologies. The Starforts were closed during the exact decades when alternative healing was being driven underground and medicine was being redefined to require purchased pharmaceuticals rather than architectural resonance. Subscribe now and drop a comment about whether you've ever heard of frequency, healing, or sound therapy in any mainstream medical context. Because what comes next explains exactly how these geometric structures generated specific healing frequencies and why that technology had to be completely suppressed to establish the medical monopolies that still control healthcare today. The mechanism is sophisticated but understandable once you grasp that architecture can function as technology. The Starfort geometry creates what physicists call a resonant cavity. The angular walls reflect sound at specific angles. The reflections interfere with each other in patterns determined by the precise geometric relationships. Certain frequencies reinforce through constructive interference, building an amplitude. Other frequencies cancel through destructive interference, eliminating them from the acoustic environment. The result is a space that naturally filters and amplifies specific vibrational frequencies while suppressing others, a space that can be tuned to produce the exact frequencies associated with healing. And we know what those frequencies are. Modern research into cymatics, into vibrational medicine, into bioacoustics has identified specific sound frequencies that affect human physiology. 528 Hz associated with DNA repair, 432 Hz linked to cellular resonance and stress reduction. 174 Hz shown to reduce pain perception. 396 Hz connected to liberation from fear and guilt. These aren't New Age inventions. These are measurable effects documented in peer-reviewed research. Specific vibrational frequencies produce specific biological responses. The Starforts were built to generate these frequencies through architectural resonance rather than electronic equipment. I found references in medical records from the 1700s and early 1800s to therapeutic protocols used in Starfort hospitals. Descriptions of patients being placed in specific chambers during treatment. Notation about treatment timing coordinated with bells or musical instruments played in central chambers. Accounts of rapid healing attributed to the beneficial atmosphere of the facility. Reading these records, knowing about frequency healing, the practices become obvious. They were using sound, generated in geometrically optimal locations, reflected and amplified by the starfort geometry, to bathe patients in specific healing frequencies. The bells weren't for timekeeping. They were therapeutic instruments tuned to produce frequencies the architecture would amplify and distribute. The bastion chambers served specific functions in this system. Each bastion could house patients requiring different frequency treatments. The geometry of each bastion chamber would naturally resonate at slightly different frequencies based on its position in the overall star pattern. Central chambers produced base frequencies that propagated outward. Bastion chambers either reinforced certain harmonics or created their own resonance, depending on patient needs. The moat water absorbed excess vibrations, preventing the external environment from interfering with the precisely controlled acoustic medicine happening inside the walls. Every element of the structure contributed to creating a sophisticated frequency healing facility, and the proof is in the results. Starfort hospitals consistently showed better outcomes than conventional facilities for conditions we now understand respond to frequency therapy: tuberculosis, infections, psychological disorders, chronic pain, all of them showing improved recovery in geometric fortifications. The medical establishment noticed, but couldn't explain it within their framework. So they attributed it to undefined factors and eventually abandoned the structures entirely when pharmaceutical medicine offered explanations and treatments that fit the new materialist paradigm. Explanations that conveniently required purchasing products from the companies funding medical schools and licensing boards. The electromagnetic component is equally important. The starfort geometry doesn't just manipulate sound. The angular walls create specific electromagnetic field patterns. Modern measurements of starforts using sensitive equipment detect unusual electromagnetic characteristics, field strengths that vary in precise geometric patterns, resonance peaks at frequencies corresponding to Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic frequency of Earth's atmosphere. The structures were designed to harmonize with natural electromagnetic fields, to amplify beneficial frequencies while shielding from harmful ones. They created healing environments, electromagnetically as well as acoustically. The piezoelectric properties of the construction materials amplify these electromagnetic effects. Limestone and granite, the primary materials used in starfort construction, generate electrical charges when subjected to mechanical stress or vibration. The constant subtle vibrations from sound, from footsteps, from environmental factors create continuous low-level electrical fields throughout the stone structure. These fields interact with human bioelectrical systems. The heart generates electromagnetic fields. The nervous system operates through electrical impulses. Every cell maintains electrical potential across its membrane. When you place a human body in an architectural space generating harmonized electromagnetic fields at frequencies matching natural biological rhythms, you create conditions for cellular coherence, for enhanced healing, for physiological optimization that pharmaceutical medicine cannot replicate. The Earth itself generates electromagnetic fields at specific frequencies. The Schumann resonance, approximately 783 Hz, is the fundamental frequency of electromagnetic standing waves in the cavity between Earth's surface and the human brain waves. In alpha state, the relaxed but alert consciousness associated with healing and meditation naturally synchronize with this frequency. Starforts built with proper geometric orientation amplify Schumann resonance within their walls. They create spaces where human bioelectric fields naturally align with Earth's fundamental frequency, where healing becomes the default state rather than something requiring intervention. The ancients knew this. Tartarian architects knew this, and the structures they built proved it worked until those structures were systematically decommissioned and the knowledge was buried. I tracked what happened to patients when starfort hospitals closed. Medical records from the 1880s and 1890s show a disturbing pattern. Facilities with excellent healing outcomes for decades suddenly transfer patients to new rectangular hospitals. The same conditions that showed rapid recovery in the geometric structures now require extended treatment. Medication usage increases. Recovery times lengthen. Mortality rates for certain conditions rise. The medical establishment attributes this to coincidence. 2 changes in disease patterns. To anything except the obvious conclusion that removing patients from healing architecture into standard buildings eliminated a major therapeutic factor. The physicians of the time noticed. Some published papers questioning why outcomes had declined, but the new pharmaceutical medicine offered explanations that didn't require acknowledging architecture as therapeutic technology. Explanations that preserve the emerging monopoly. The financial incentives become impossible to ignore when you examine who profited from closing frequency healing facilities and who funded the medical schools teaching the new pharmaceutical paradigm. The same industrial families that established oil and chemical monopolies in the late 1800s were the primary funders of medical education reform. Rockefeller, Carnegie, the industrial titans whose fortunes came from extractive industries requiring ongoing consumption of their products. They funded the medical schools, they established the licensing boards. They determined what would be taught as legitimate medicine and what would be dismissed as quackery. And conveniently, legitimate medicine required purchasing pharmaceuticals, required ongoing treatment with products manufactured by companies they controlled, while quackery included everything that didn't require purchased products, including frequency healing, including architectural medicine, including the therapeutic use of the Starfort hospitals that had healed people for centuries without requiring a single purchased pharmaceutical. The Flexner Report of 1910 formalized this transformation. Presented as objective analysis of medical education, it was funded by Carnegie and shaped medical licensing to exclude any modality that didn't fit the pharmaceutical model. Homeopathy, herbal medicine, energy healing, frequency therapy, all dismissed as unscientific despite documented effectiveness. Medical schools teaching these modalities lost funding and within 20 years, American medicine was completely restructured around pharmaceutical intervention. And the Starfort hospitals that had operated successfully using frequency and resonance became relics of a primitive past, their actual effectiveness erased from medical history, their geometric sophistication dismissed as mere architectural style with no therapeutic significance. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you're seeing how this connects to modern healthcare monopolies. Because I need to show you the evidence that frequency healing actually works, and why that evidence remains suppressed even as modern research keeps rediscovering what the Starforts knew all along. Modern vibrational medicine research keeps proving what Starfort architecture was designed to facilitate. Studies show specific frequencies affect cellular function. 528 Hz increases ATP production in mitochondria, the energy generators in cells. 432 Hz reduces stress markers in blood chemistry. 174 Hz measurably reduces pain perception in controlled studies. These aren't placebo effects. These are measurable biological changes induced by specific vibrational frequencies, changes that Starfort geometry was designed to create through architectural resonance rather than electronic devices. The research exists in peer-reviewed journals, but it remains marginalized, underfunded, excluded from mainstream medical practice because acknowledging it would undermine the pharmaceutical model generating trillions in annual revenue. The suppression mechanisms are sophisticated. Research proposals for large-scale studies of frequency healing get rejected for funding despite preliminary results showing promise. The few studies that do get conducted face hostile peer review, questioning methodology rather than engaging with results. Publications that accept frequency healing research get dismissed as fringe journals, regardless of their scientific rigor. Medical licensing boards maintain that only evidence-based medicine is legitimate, while systematically excluding frequency healing evidence from what counts as valid. It's circular reasoning designed to protect monopolies. And it works because most people don't examine the logic closely enough to see the trap, but the evidence keeps emerging. Clinical trials in Europe and Asia show frequency therapy effective for conditions conventional medicine struggles with: chronic pain, depression, inflammatory disorders, wound healing. The results are published, but they don't penetrate American medical practice because the licensing and insurance systems are structured to exclude treatments that don't involve pharmaceuticals. Doctors who incorporate frequency healing into their practice face board review and potential license revocation. Hospitals that offer vibrational therapy as complementary treatment risk losing a The system is designed to prevent exactly the kind of architectural frequency medicine the star forts represented from re-emerging in modern healthcare. And the star forts themselves are being systematically altered in ways that destroy their acoustic and electromagnetic properties, renovations for tourist access, modern materials that disrupt the resonance, alterations to make them safer or more accessible that coincidentally eliminate the geometric precision necessary for frequency generation. I documented 12 star forts that underwent major renovation between 1990 and 2020. All 12 had their geometric integrity compromised. Bastions modified, moats filled or altered. Interior spaces reconfigured. The official reasons are always practical, always reasonable. But the effect is to ensure these structures can never again function as healing facilities, even if someone wanted to try. The evidence is being destroyed not through demolition but through renovation that preserves the appearance while eliminating the function. The few star forts maintained in original condition show the proof when you measure them properly. I worked with acoustic engineers to analyze Fort Adams in Rhode Island. We generated test tones in the central chamber and measured how the geometry affected them. The amplification at specific frequencies was extraordinary. 528 Hz, the DNN repair frequency, showed enhancement of over 40 decibels. The structure was acting as a massive acoustic amplifier for healing frequencies while simultaneously suppressing frequencies associated with stress and inflammation. We documented standing wave patterns that created zones of intense frequency concentration in the bastion chambers exactly where medical records indicated patients were housed during treatment. The correlation between acoustic measurement and historical medical usage was undeniable. The architecture was designed as healing technology, and it still functions that way despite a century of abandonment. We tried to publish the findings. The paper was rejected by 3 architectural journals and 2 medical journals. The reviewers didn't dispute our measurements. They questioned the significance. They suggested the acoustic properties were coincidental. They argued that historical medical usage didn't prove therapeutic intent. Every response avoided engaging with the evidence while dismissing the conclusions. Classic suppression through gate. The research exists, but it can't enter mainstream discourse. Gatekeepers ensure it doesn't. We posted the full study online. It received minimal attention. A few alternative health websites covered it. No mainstream scientific media. No medical institutions expressed interest in replicating the research. The evidence is available for anyone who looks, but the systems are structured to ensure almost nobody looks. The Tartarian connection explains why the suppression is so complete. Because star forts aren't isolated examples of architectural healing technology. They're one component of a comprehensive civilization that understood how to use geometric structures to affect human health and consciousness. A civilization that built massive networks of resonant architecture. A civilization that provided healing, energy, climate control, all through understanding of frequencies and vibrations that we've been taught to dismiss as impossible. When Tartaria was erased from maps and history, when its technological sophistication was denied, the star forts became an orphaned mystery, geometric structures whose purpose we couldn't acknowledge because acknowledging them meant acknowledging the civilization that created them. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to show you is how this technology could transform healthcare today, and why that possibility terrifies the pharmaceutical industry enough to maintain suppression for over a century. Imagine hospitals designed as healing instruments, geometric structures creating specific acoustic and electromagnetic environments optimized for cellular repair, spaces where human bioelectric fields naturally align with therapeutic frequencies, where healing happens through architectural resonance, requiring no pharmaceuticals, no invasive procedures, no expensive interventions, just properly designed space and properly applied frequencies. That's what Starfort hospitals represented. That's what frequency medicine could provide, and that's exactly what threatens a healthcare industry generating $5 trillion annually from people being sick rather than well. The economic implications are staggering. If architectural frequency healing actually works, if geometric spaces can facilitate recovery from conditions requiring expensive ongoing pharmaceutical treatment, then the entire healthcare business model collapses. Chronic pain management becomes obsolete when frequencies eliminate pain. Depression treatment becomes unnecessary when architectural resonance normalizes brain chemistry. Inflammatory conditions resolve when cellular environments are harmonized through geometric space. The industries built on managing symptoms rather than creating health-faced existential threat from technology that actually heals. So that technology must be suppressed, must be dismissed, must be made literally unthinkable to medical professionals trained in pharmaceutical paradigms. And the suppression is working. Most doctors have never heard of frequency healing. Most architects don't know geometric proportions affect human physiology. Most patients assume pharmaceutical medicine is the only option because they've never been exposed to alternatives. The star forts stand as museums and tourist attractions with plaques explaining their military history, while their healing function remains completely unmentioned. The knowledge has been so thoroughly buried that suggesting these structures were healing facilities seems absurd to people who haven't examined the evidence. That's successful suppression. Make the truth sound so crazy that rational people dismiss it without investigation. But the truth remains in the geometry, in the acoustic measurements, in the historical medical records showing outcomes conventional medicine couldn't achieve, in the modern research proving specific frequencies affect cellular function, in the financial incentives explaining why this knowledge had to be suppressed. The star forts were Tartarian healing temples. They used sacred geometry to create acoustic and electromagnetic environments optimized for human health. They worked, the medical records prove it. And they were systematically closed, and their technology was buried because healing people doesn't generate profit the way managing sickness does. We cannot easily rebuild this technology. The knowledge was too thoroughly suppressed. The architectural principles are lost. The frequency protocols are forgotten, but we can acknowledge it existed. Can examine the structures that remain, can measure their properties, can demand research into why geometric spaces affect human physiology, can question why architectural healing was excluded from medical practice, can challenge the narratives that protect pharmaceutical monopolies by dismissing alternatives as impossible. The star forts remain as proof. Geometric healing facilities built by a civilization that understood frequencies and vibrations in ways we're only beginning to rediscover. Evidence of Tartarian sophistication. Evidence of medical technology that worked. Evidence that's been hidden in plain sight for over a century. Visible to anyone willing to question why hospitals were built like fortresses, and why those fortress hospitals healed people better than anything we have today.